A reclusive artist in an empire of fading glory paints portraits that erase their subjects from existence. As his final commission nears, he must choose between creation, guilt, and the ghosts his art has claimed.
The evening air was cool and still as Wei Chen made his way through the narrow streets of the imperial city. The moon hung low, casting pale silver light over the ancient rooftops, and the faint murmur of distant footsteps echoed softly against the lacquered walls of the palace. It was late, past the hour when most courtiers had retired to their chambers, yet Wei Chen's heart was restless, stirred by the mysterious summons he had received just hours earlier. The summons itself was unlike any he had encountered in his years at court. A small, delicately folded parchment sealed with the crimson emblem of the imperial dragon, an insignia reserved for the most secretive and urgent matters, had arrived in the hands of a silent palace messenger. No explanation accompanied it, only a directive to come immediately to the palace's hidden mural chambers. The weight of the seal pressed heavily on Wei Chen's thoughts as he approached the palace gates, their ornate carvings dimly illuminated by flickering lanterns. Inside, the palace breathed a different life at night. The usual bustle of advisors, guards, and servants was replaced by a hushed stillness, broken only by the soft padding of footsteps on polished stone. Wei Chen's senses heightened, the scent of aged wood mingled with the faint trace of incense, the distant swirl of silk robes brushing against marble pillars. Guided by a palace attendant whose face was obscured in shadow, Wei Chen traversed long corridors lined with ancient tapestries depicting battles and ceremonies of centuries past. At last, they arrived before a heavy wooden door, its surface carved with intricate dragons and phoenixes locked in eternal dance. The attendant paused, bowed deeply, and then pushed open the door to reveal a chamber unlike any Wei Chen had seen before. The walls were covered in faded murals, the colors dulled with time, but still telling stories of dynasties long vanished. Scenes of emperors in radiant glory, of courtiers whispering secrets, of battles won and lost, all frozen in paint and silence. It was here that Wei Chen was to meet the emperor himself. The chamber was dimly lit by hanging lanterns, whose warm glow cast trembling shadows across the murals. At the far end stood Emperor Zhu Yujian, regal and imposing in his imperial robes embroidered with golden threads that caught the light like rivers of flame. His gaze was steady, inscrutable, as he regarded the painter with a mixture of command and something softer, almost wary. "Wei Chen," the emperor began, his voice low but clear, "the time has come for a task unlike any before. Your skill is known throughout the empire, your brush a vessel for truth and beauty. Yet what I ask of you is a paradox, to immortalize my reign and grandeur while erasing the man behind the throne." Wei Chen's breath caught. The paradox was as sharp as a blade. To paint a portrait that would preserve the emperor's image for eternity, yet obliterate the emperor's true self from memory and history, it was a command heavy with unspoken consequences. "Why such a decree, your majesty?" Wei Chen asked cautiously, his voice betraying a flicker of doubt. The emperor's eyes darkened, reflecting the flickering lantern light. "Our dynasty is crumbling, torn by rebellion and decay. Yet the image of strength must endure beyond the frailty of flesh and time. Through your art, I shall live in the minds of my people as the eternal sovereign, unblemished by mortal flaws." Silence settled over the chamber like a thick fog. Wei Chen felt the weight of the task pressing down on his shoulders, the conflict between duty and conscience stirring within him. Could he create a likeness that both celebrated and concealed? Could his brush dance between illusion and truth without losing himself? Madame Lion, the palace advisor and keeper of the forbidden murals, stepped forward. Her silver-streaked hair shimmered in the lantern light, and her dark eyes held secrets as old as the dynasty itself. "Wei Chen," she intoned softly, "these murals you see a testament to the power and peril of memory. The past is a fragile thing, easily rewritten or forgotten. Your work will be the next chapter in that story. Choose your strokes wisely. The painter nodded, his thoughts swirling like ink in water. As he gazed upon the faded murals, he felt the echo of vanished emperors, whispering through the ages, a haunting reminder of the impermanence of power, the cost of silence, and the burden of legacy. That night, as Wei Chen retreated to his chambers, the emperor's decree echoed in his mind. The summons to the forbidden chambers was not merely a call to paint. It was an invitation to traverse the delicate boundary between memory and oblivion. And with every brushstroke to come, Wei Chen would be forced to confront the fragile nature of existence itself. Outside, the moon continued its slow journey across the sky, indifferent to the mortal struggles unfolding beneath its light. Within the walls of the palace, a painter prepared to wield his brush not just as an artist, but as a keeper of secrets and a shaper of history's fading shadows. The journey had begun, and with it, the haunting dance between creation and inertia. The morning light filtered through the narrow lattice windows of the palace's painting chamber, casting a muted glow on Wei Chen's slender frame as he settled before the expanse of fine rice paper laid on the polished wooden table. The air was thick with the scent of ink and crushed pigments, a familiar comfort mingled now with an undercurrent of unease. Minister Zhao stood silently near the entrance, his dark robes a stark contrast to the delicate surroundings, eyes sharp and unyielding as they bore down on Wei Chen's every movement. Wei Chen dipped his brush carefully into the inkstone, the cool liquid pooling at its tip like a droplet of night. His hand trembled ever so slightly, not from lack of skill, but from the weight of the task before him. To paint the emperor was an honor beyond measure, yet the decree he had been given twisted this honor into a bitter paradox. To immortalize a sovereign by erasing the man himself. His brush hovered, then began its dance, strokes flowing with practiced grace. The emperor's visage emerged regal, poised, a symbol of eternal authority. Yet beneath the surface, Wei Chen's conscience stirred. The portraits demanded perfection, an idealized image that concealed the frailty and fear that lurked behind the imperial mask. As the lines took form, a subtle shift began to creep into Wei Chen's work. The edges of the emperor's robes blurred, dissolving into wisps of mist that seemed to pull away from the figure like fading echoes. Eyes that once commanded now flickered with shadows, hinting at the loneliness behind the throne. The brush traced faint, almost imperceptible veins of imperfection, tiny fractures in the jade façade. Minister Zhao's gaze never wavered, yet Wei Chen felt its weight heavier with each surreal detail that slipped into his sketches. The chamber's silence was punctuated only by the scratching of brush on paper and Wei Chen's measured breathing. His heart wrestled between the loyalty ingrained in his blood and the rebellious whispers of his soul. At the threshold, a small figure appeared, Jin Hua, the apprentice whose youthful eyes gleamed with unspoken questions. He approached quietly, his ink-stained fingers trembling with excitement and apprehension. Wei Chen glanced up, offering a brief, wary smile. "Master," Jin Hua whispered, "why does the emperor's face seem to dissolve in your sketches?" Wei Chen's eyes met the boy's, and for a moment the heavy mask of duty slipped. "Because," he said softly, "sometimes what we see is not what must be remembered." Jin Hua's gaze sharpened with a mixture of confusion and dawning understanding. He returned to the shadows, leaving Wei Chen alone once more with his conflicted brush. Hours passed, and the chamber grew dim, shadows lengthening like the fading days of the dynasty itself. Wei Chen leaned back, eyes scanning the pages littered with images both majestic and haunting. The surreal motifs whispered secrets of impermanence, of loss, of a truth too dangerous to declare aloud. The artist's soul ached with the knowledge that each stroke was both creation and erasure, a silent rebellion waged in ink and color. The emperor's immortal image would endure, but the man beneath would vanish, swallowed by the artistry meant to preserve him. Wei Chen closed his eyes, the echo of the brush's glide lingering in his mind. Duty demanded obedience, but his heart beat with the quiet defiance of those surreal lines, fragile yet resolute. like the fragile flame of memory flickering against the dark tide of oblivion. Outside, the palace hummed with whispers and watchful eyes. Within the chamber, a painter wrestled with the ghosts of history, wielding brushes that could both save and destroy. As the day ended, Wei Chen's hand rested beside the inkstone, the final sketch, before him a testament to his inner turmoil, a portrait both reverent and rebellious, a silent scream in the court of vanishing emperors. And yet the question lingered, sharp and unresolved. How long could a man paint shadows before becoming one himself? The chamber doors closed softly behind Minister Zio's departing steps, and Jin Ho's footsteps faded into the distant corridors. Wei Chen's gaze returned to the paper, the surreal edges of the emperor's face shimmering like a mirage, beautiful, haunting, and impossibly fragile. The early morning light filtered through the carved wooden lattices of the palace corridors, casting fragmented patterns across the polished stone floor. Wei Chen sat quietly in his painting chamber, the scent of ink and drying pigments filling the air. His brush hovered over the delicate silk stretched taut on the frame. The emperor's visage was beginning to take shape, a regal countenance, calm and composed, yet Wei Chen's eyes sought something beyond the surface, something the court demanded he omit. As his brush moved with practiced grace, faint voices drifted through the open window, carried on a breeze that stirred the silken curtains. At first, it was nothing more than murmurs, but as Wei Chen paused, he caught fragments of words, whispers of rebellion, of forbidden love, of a palace simmering with secrets. His heart tightened. The emperor's carefully crafted image was not the entire truth. Beneath the gilded surface, the empire trembled. Jin Ho, his young apprentice, stood nearby, sketching fervently on a scrap of parchment. The boy's eyes sparkled with a mixture of awe and defiance as he glanced up at Wei Chen. "Master," Jin Ho whispered, "I drew something new, see." He unfolded the paper to reveal a symbol hidden within a floral motif, a subtle mockery of imperial authority. Wei Chen's gaze lingered on the ink-stained fingers of his apprentice, a stark contrast to the careful restraint demanded by the court. Outside the chamber, the heavy footsteps of Minister Zhao echoed sharply against the cold stone. The political enforcer's presence was a constant reminder of the peril that shadowed every act of creation within the palace walls. Wei Chen felt the weight of Zhao's scrutiny, even without his gaze upon him. The minister's role was clear: ensure all obeyed the emperor's will, and punish defiance without mercy. That night, Wei Chen wandered the palace corridors, the whispers now louder in his mind. He paused outside a pair of concealed chambers where soft laughter and stolen words hinted at a clandestine romance. Madame Lion's voice, low and measured, interwove with the younger woman's, their conversation a delicate dance of loyalty and longing. The painter's soul ached with the knowledge that these human stories would be lost beneath the grand narrative he was commanded to paint. Back in his chamber, Wei Chen resumed his work, his brush strokes trembling with the burden of unspoken truths. Each line he drew was a negotiation between duty and conscience, memory and oblivion. The emperor's portrait grew not only as a symbol of power, but as a canvas of contradictions, strength veiled by fear, immortality shadowed by impending ruin. Jin Ho's youthful defiance inspired Wei Chen to explore subtle illusions within his art, embedding hidden symbols that spoke of resistance and hope. Yet, the painter remained haunted by the knowledge that every stroke erased fragments of the emperor's humanity, and, with it, parts of his own soul. The chamber was cloaked in shadows, the faint scent of incense curling through the air as Wei Chen entered with measured steps. The walls, draped in ancient silk tapestries faded by time, seemed to hold their breath in reverence. At the room's center stood Madame Lion, her silver-streaked hair a striking contrast against the dim glow of the flickering candles. Her dark eyes caught the light, sharp and penetrating, as she regarded the young painter with a knowing calm. "Wei Chen," she began, her voice a quiet thread weaving through the stillness, "you have been entrusted with a burden heavier than brush and pigment. The portraits you are to create will shape the memory of this dynasty, but at a cost that few dare to speak aloud. Wei Chen's gaze faltered, the weight of her words settling deep within him. Madam Lion, I have been summoned to immortalize the emperor, yet I fear these images demand the erasure of his true self. How can art serve both preservation and oblivion? A faint smile touched her lips, enigmatic and somber. The murals you see, hidden away from common eyes, hold the echoes of emperors long gone. They speak not only of glory but of silence and loss. Each stroke conceals as much as it reveals. She gestured toward a distant wall, where faint outlines of faded murals whispered of forgotten histories. Approaching the wall, Wei Chen's fingers hovered just above the textured surface, tracing the ghostly shapes concealed beneath layers of dust and neglect. These stories, they are alive yet silent, he murmured, a mixture of awe and sorrow coloring his voice. Madame Lian nodded. They embody the fragile dance between memory and forgetting. Our dynasty's dignity hinges on the delicate balance of what is shown and what remains hidden. You must understand that your art is not merely creation, it is a form of preservation and a tool of erasure. The room seemed to pulse with the weight of unspoken truths. Wei Chen's thoughts swirled like ink in water, the lines between loyalty and conscience blurring. How does one honor the past when the past demands silence? By recognizing that every image wields power, Madame Lion replied softly. The emperor seeks to be immortal, yet immortality demands sacrifice. You, Wei Chen, stand at the crossroads of this sacrifice. What you choose to reveal or conceal will ripple through time. A sudden breeze stirred, carrying with it the flutter of paper scrolls on Wei Chen's desk. Their movement was erratic, mirroring the uncertainty tightening around his heart. The ancient chamber, once a sanctuary of secrets, now felt like a crucible forging his resolve. You must tread carefully, Madame Lion cautioned, her gaze steady. The palace is a realm of shadows, where truth is often a luxury. But remember, not all silence is consent, and not all obedience is surrender. Wei Chen swallowed hard, the gravity of her counsel settling like ink staining the fabric of his soul. I will carry this burden, Madame Lion, but I fear the path ahead is fraught with peril. She stepped closer, her voice a whisper meant only for him. Then paint not just with your hands, but with your heart. Let your brush speak the silent stories that words cannot. As Madame Lion turned away, her robes sweeping the floor with quiet grace, Wei Chen felt a flicker of something new, a silent rebellion awakening within him. The chamber's shadows seemed less oppressive now, as if illuminated by the faint glow of hope. Alone amid the ancient walls, Wei Chen contemplated the fragile legacy entrusted to him. The mural's hidden tales and Madame Lion's cryptic guidance had unsettled his certainty, yet gifted him a deeper understanding of the power he wielded. His art was no longer a mere reflection of imperial command. It was a battleground of memory and erasure, truth and illusion. Outside, the palace breathed with the weight of secrets and the murmurs of a fading dynasty. Inside, Wei Chen's brush trembled with purpose, poised to carve a path through the delicate interplay of history and silence. The journey ahead would demand courage beyond the stroke of paint. It would demand the courage to see beyond the emperor's visage and into the soul that sought to vanish. In that moment, the painter embraced the paradox of his calling. To immortalize was to erase, to preserve was to betray. Yet within this contradiction lay the fragile hope that art could transcend the silence, whispering truths through the ages even when voices were stilled. And so, with the weight of centuries pressing upon him, Wei Chen prepared to paint not just a portrait, but a legacy, one that would haunt the palace halls long after the emperors had vanished into the mists of time. The candlelight flickered once more, casting dancing shadows that blurred the line between memory and oblivion. The forbidden murals awaited, and with them the secrets of a dynasty's soul. Wei Chen's silent rebellion had begun. The morning light filtered softly through the paper windows of the painter's quarters, casting a gentle glow on the rows of delicate brushes and the neat stacks of rice paper. Wei Chen sat quietly at his worktable, his slender fingers tracing the faint outlines of an unfinished portrait. The air was thick with the scent of ink and turpentine, mingling with the faint aroma of jasmine tea cooling in a porcelain cup. A hesitant knock interrupted the stillness. Wei Chen looked up to see a young boy standing in the doorway. His eyes sparkled with a mix of nervousness and excitement, and his slender frame was dusted with the remnants of charcoal and ink stains. This was Jin Hoa, the court's newest apprentice, summoned to learn the ancient and secretive art that Wei Chen had mastered over years of dedication. "Master Wei," Jin Hoa began, bowing deeply, "I am honored to begin my studies under your guidance." Wei Chen nodded, the weight of responsibility settling upon him. "Come in, Jin Hoa. The path ahead is arduous, but the brush is a powerful tool, one that can both preserve and destroy." In the days that followed, Jin Hoa immersed himself in the rhythms of the studio. His youthful enthusiasm was infectious, but his inexperience was evident. Wei Chen watched as the boy struggled to steady his hand, to control the flow of ink, to capture the subtle shifts of light and shadow. One evening, as the lanterns flickered and cast dancing shadows on the walls, Jin Ho's frustration spilled over. "Why must we paint only what the emperor commands?" he asked, voice tinged with rebellion. "Is there no place for truth in our art?" Wei Chen's gaze darkened, the question stirring a tempest within him. "Art serves the empire, Jin Hoa. It immortalizes power and preserves order. Truth is a luxury we cannot afford." But Jin Hoa's eyes shone with defiance. "Perhaps it is our duty to show the world what lies beneath the surface, to capture what others fear to see." The tension between master and apprentice grew, a fragile thread weaving doubt and hope. Jin Ho's sketches began to stray from the traditional, his brush strokes bold and unrestrained. He painted figures cloaked in shadow, faces etched with sorrow and strength, symbols that whispered of rebellion and resistance. Wei Chen found himself drawn to these images, their raw honesty piercing the veil of illusion he had long maintained. Yet the shadow of the court's watchful eyes loomed ever near, a reminder of the peril that accompanied such defiance. One night, Wei Chen stood before his easel, brush poised over the canvas. The faces of emperors past seemed to flicker in the candlelight, their silent gazes urging him onward. Beside him, Jin Hoa sketched furiously, his hand guided by a fire that refused to be quenched. Together, Jin Hoa whispered, "We can paint a future where truth lives, even if it must be hidden." Wei Chen hesitated, then nodded. The apprentice's spark had ignited a flame within him, a fragile hope amidst the encroaching darkness of Erisha. As the palace slept, two artists worked in secret, their brush strokes a silent rebellion against the fading of memory and the tyranny of oblivion. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, Wei Chen glimpsed a path that might preserve not only the emperor's legacy, but the soul of the man behind the throne, and perhaps his own. The night deepened, and the shadows lengthened, yet within the quiet studio, a new light flickered, a fragile, defiant promise born of paint and hope. And so, the apprentice's spark illuminated the painter's soul, setting in motion the delicate dance of art, memory, and resistance that would shape the fate of an empire. The first strokes of this new chapter had been laid, but the canvas of destiny awaited the unfolding tale. Wei Chen knew the choices ahead would test not only his skill, but the very essence of his being. The question remained, could the brush wielded in silence speak loudly enough to change the course of history? His hand trembled slightly as he dipped the brush once more into the ink, the dance between duty and truth just beginning. The palace studio stood shrouded in a muted hush, the only sound the gentle scratch of Wei Chen's brush gliding across the smooth silk canvas. The air was cool, scented faintly with the sharp tang of ink, and the dry mustiness of old parchment stacked in neat piles nearby. Outside, the distant clamor of the palace faded into an almost imperceptible background, as if the world beyond these stone walls had ceased to exist. Here, in this secret chamber bathed in pale morning light filtering through lattice windows, Wei Chen toiled with a restless spirit. His slender fingers, calloused from years of practice, moved with deliberate care, layering shadow upon light, stroke upon stroke, weaving an intricate tapestry where reality blurred with illusion. The subject of his latest work was Emperor Zhu Yujian, the last sovereign of a crumbling dynasty, yet the portrait was unlike any Wei Chen had painted before. It was no mere likeness. It was a silent narrative, a subtle rebellion encoded within pigments and brushwork. The emperor's robes shimmered with faint, almost imperceptible patterns, delicate serpentine dragons curling into the folds, their eyes gleaming with a secret fire. Behind the imperial gaze, Wei Chen had hidden shadowy figures, whispering ghosts that seemed to breathe beneath the surface. These were the unspoken truths, the vulnerabilities the emperor sought to erase from history. Jin Hua, his apprentice, stood nearby, eyes bright with youthful curiosity. The boy's fingers were stained ink black, evidence of his eager attempts to mimic his master's technique. Master, Jin Ho whispered, leaning forward to peer closer at the canvas, "Why do the dragons seem to move when I shift my view?" Wei Chen smiled faintly, a rare softness in his otherwise solemn demeanor. "It is the nature of truth, Jin Ha," he replied quietly. "It changes with perspective. What one sees depends on where one stands." The apprentice's gaze lingered on the hidden symbols, his mind alight with questions unspoken. Jin Hao's youthful idealism was a stark contrast to the heavy weight pressing on Wei Chen's heart. The boy represented a new generation, one unburdened by the shackles of imperial decree, yet caught within the same suffocating walls. Outside the studio door, the unmistakable footfalls of Minister Zhao approached, heavy, measured, and ominous. Wei Chen felt a familiar tightening in his chest. The minister was the embodiment of the emperor's iron will, enforcing decrees with ruthless efficiency. His presence was a constant reminder of the thin line Wei Chen walked between obedience and defiance. Wei Chen lowered his brush, the momentary pause filled with unspoken tension. He knew that each hidden symbol, each illusion embedded beneath the surface was a risk. Discovery would mean ruin, not just for him, but for all who dared to glimpse the forbidden truths. Yet the act of embedding these secret messages was a balm to his conscience, a way to preserve the emperor's humanity, even as the official portraits sought to erase it. As Minister Xiao's footsteps receded down the corridor, Wei Chen exhaled slowly, his thoughts swirling like ink dropped into water, dark, spreading, impossible to contain. He returned to the canvas, his brush now more deliberate, each stroke a silent act of courage. The emperor's gaze in the portrait seemed to flicker with life, a fragile echo of a man trapped between power and mortality. Jin Hoa watched, inspired by his master's subtle rebellion. One day the boy said softly, "I will paint the truth without fear." Wei Chen's eyes met Jin Hoa's, a flicker of hope kindling amidst the shadows. "Perhaps," he murmured, "but for now, our truth must remain hidden beneath the ink." The afternoon waned, and the studio grew dimmer, but Wei Chen's hand did not falter. The secrets under ink multiplied, each brushstroke a testament to the fragile dance between memory and oblivion. The portraits were no longer mere images, they had become whispered stories, veiled in mystery and defiance, reflecting not only the emperor's duality, but Wei Chen's own internal struggle. As twilight settled over the palace, Wei Chen set down his brush and stepped back to survey his work. The painting held its secrets well, an intricate web of light and shadow, truth and illusion, bound forever in colors that would outlast the fleeting years. Yet beneath the surface, he felt the growing weight of his concealed rebellion. How long could he continue this dangerous game before the shadows consumed him?